Hey, what's going on? Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting to you live from Flyover. What's happening? It is 9:05, and it is 9:26. Right, 26? 9:25. Change the date here. I'm working on these new glasses. They are these blue blockers. I'm trying to cut down on the orange, the blue light, and bring in more UV light. Gives me kind of a weird effect, though, doesn't it? Just slightly. Hello, Judy. Yeah, I think I may change just for now. Let me get the old ones back on. I like these. I can work with these, especially at night. But I'm gonna do something different here. Yeah, it's better. You won't be distracted by the blue reflection that's coming through. What's going on out there? How is life in the Matrix today? How's everybody feeling? I know it's early in the day, but you can still take a bit of a temperature. Let's see how we're doing. I'm just going to have a little sip of my coffee. There's Emily. Welcome, Emily, to the proceedings. Nice to see you today. Well, we have, of course, more to talk about with the Kavanaugh affair. I think we'll probably start off there because it's in the news. It's newsworthy. We're following it. It's topical. And we try to bring it all back home so that there's something that we can pull out of this that will be have some spiritual merit for our lives, if that's possible. And I think it is. Let's get to the latest on the Kavanaugh event. Chuck Grassley, who's a Republican, Kavanaugh nonsense makes me miss the Russian collusion. I know. It's like there's always got to be something. There's always got to be something because we just can't allow a governance to take place, whether you like it or not. Just can't be allowed. There's got to be some kind of infighting. There's got to be some kind of conflict. And this is all part of the overall plan, which is ultimately to overthrow the United States government and impose a different style of government. This is the plan of the new Bolshevism. And we'll just go on for 2 years. Yeah, it's going to go on until Donald Trump is out of office. I'm telling you right now. He's about to fire Rosenstein. I think it came down to, does he fire Rosenstein or does he fire Sessions? I think if he fires Rosenstein, Sessions is kind of put in a corner without an ally. And it's clear that Rod Rosenstein is an ally. And the problem with this whole thing with the Russiagate is when Jeff Sessions recused himself and did not get involved and left it into, basically handed the ball off to Rod Rosenstein. And it's been an absolute disaster as a result, because really there's no Russian collusion involved. I mean, there's nothing. We're into this thing now for, almost going on 2 years, and there's nothing there. I've had a really interesting conversation last night with a friend of mine who tends to be pretty liberal. And this is a text on Facebook. And she said how much she couldn't stand Trump. She couldn't stand looking at his face, and that he needed to go to jail. I'm like, why? Why does he need to go to jail? Because he's a bad person? Because he talked about grabbing a woman's hoochie? I mean, I like this person. She's a friend. But to say that he needs to go to jail because he had horrible language, it's not a jailable offense. I'm sorry. It's not an imprisonable offense. So she said, well, what about, hello, Lori, good morning. What about the Russian collusion? All the votes are in there because of the Russian collusion. And I said, um, "That's a lie." And I said, "Have you ever heard of Seth Rich?" "Hey, Stephen, nice to see you there." I said, "Have you ever heard of Seth Rich?" And she said, "The name sounds vaguely familiar. Is he a Republican?" And I like this person. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to single this person out and you know bitch slap them or whatever. I'm not here to do that. That's not what I'm sharing is that they're woefully uninformed and that they're running off a current of emotion. And there's a difference between like emotion and feeling, you know, kind of a resonance. It's different. Emotions can be really reactive. Feelings can be reactive too, don't get me wrong. But it's there's a difference here. And so we have a group of people, we have a nation of people that are running off of this emotional current. And it is not a great current. It's just not. Just because somebody offends you and offended your sensibilities doesn't mean that they should be put in jail. Now, the latest or pursuant to this is that apparently Stormy Daniels' defamation suit is about to be thrown out. Meanwhile, Michael Avenatti's picking up new clients along the way because apparently there are other people who are ready to come forward with the allegations that Brett Kavanaugh did something untowards them. And this is going to come down to a showdown. They're going to continue to, I think, what was her name? Blassie Johnson got another day from Chuck Grassley to figure out whether or not she wants to go. Apparently, she has something about flying. She doesn't do well with planes. Okay, well, you know what you do? You set her up with a freaking camera so that she can be there live. Well, not live, but she could be there in a simulcast with the chambers, take the oath and everything. She doesn't even have to leave Palo Alto. Solve that problem. It is the 21st century, in case she didn't know that, right? So this thing is trudging on. There's apparently new accusers. Ronan Farrow is an interesting character in this drama. Ronan Farrow came on board pretty early on when he started to accuse his stepfather. I don't know what role Woody Allen played legally inside of that relationship, but he came on pretty early and accused his stepfather or Woody Allen uh, of molesting and sexually abusing, at the very least, grooming Soon Yi, who becomes his wife. So Farrow gets on the stage very, very early, and now he's become this conduit for Me Too. And it almost feels like somebody who crosses this border or this threshold for truth. Okay. You send her a Zoom link, Emily says about Kavanaugh. Absolutely, send her a Zoom link. Just get her in. But it feels like Ronan Farrow was brought in to this situation so that he could be this vanguard of hashtag Me Too. Now, there's another hashtag Me Too. I'm going to talk a little bit about this today. Event has occurred, and it hasn't even been something that was a crime against a woman. So this is from Sunday, and I'm reading off a website called Legit.gov, and the hashtag Me Too movement search for demons to slay has expanded well beyond just those accused of sexual misbehavior. Now, if you've done anything to disseminate the accused's side of the story, they're coming for hashtag you too. Last week, Ian Baruma not so quietly left his position as editor of the New York Review of Books. The mob had descended on him days earlier for publishing an essay by Jian Ghomeshi. Ghomeshi was a Canadian broadcaster who'd been accused of sexual assault early in the hashtag MeToo movement. Ghomeshi stood trial in Canada for sexual assault of 6 women and was acquitted of all charges in 2015. Ghomeshi's piece attempted an apology and an explanation of how he became a person he despised. Okay, so the guy's having a mea culpa moment. He's saying publicly, look, I kind of was that guy. And here I am, I'm falling on the sword publicly. Let me see. Ghomeshi's piece attempted an apology, an explanation of how he became a person he despised. In a new front for the mob, it's not enough to target the perpetrator of the misdeed. They're now targeting those who offer them a platform, like Buruma did, or say anything warm about them at all. Okay, so we've entered into a period, an era where people are being isolated and targeted, and any kind of defense or any kind of tangential support towards some form of rehabilitation now is getting lashed at. This is the mob mentality that is essentially taking place across the internet. There are people with torches on the internet right now, and they're burning down any kind of bastion or even remote outpost of free speech. And this is occurring as we speak. So if we look at it from a larger perspective, we can see that the top-down effect that's been occurring on the internet in an area that's connected to Alex Jones and a number of other websites have been either taken down, shadow banned, removed, whatever they are, or wherever they've gone. This is now sort of got this red algae bloom effect, and it's seeping into other areas, other places, other spaces. And it looks like hashtag MeToo is at the, as Jones would say, the tip of the spear on this. And it's not great. I have to say it's not great, because what's happening is it's being used as a weapon. It's being used as a weapon to disarm and dismantle a theoretically democratic process. But again, I look, I wouldn't have a problem. I wouldn't have a problem with people going after Brett Kavanaugh if they got into the real stuff, right? Like the Vince Foster stuff. But they'll never go there, because that would actually serve our country, you see. Exhuming the ghost and the body of Vince Foster through Brett Kavanaugh to understand what happened and why Vince Foster was shot, supposedly committing suicide with 3 shots, 2 of them to his head. How does that happen? That would be great. That'd be great. It's like, come on, bring it out. Let's go. Let's look at his past. Let's look at the role he had in covering that up, because it could be good for the country. Is this good for the country? No. Some people might think it is. It's not really good for consciousness. Let's take it up another notch. It is not good for consciousness. Now, I suppose one would say, oh, well, in the service of the divine feminine, this could be good for consciousness, but I don't necessarily believe that. What are we here to do? What is the nexus of our existence? Is the nexus of our existence to create fear, mistrust, cynicism, to build the theoretical wall that so many people lament? Is this what we're here for? So we have to ask ourselves, what is the net effect of hashtag MeToo? Is it creating more of a feeling of fear, mistrust, anxiety, discomfort? Is it putting up walls? Or are people more apprehensive when they're together because there's a breakdown in the field of trust between two people? I would say the answer is yes. And how is that leading us to a higher spiritual awareness? What is that adding to the consciousness of theoretically it's all love? Because it doesn't. And this is where we have to disseminate the lies and the bullshit. It's love, 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 until it comes to this movement, which is not about love. It's about exhuming the past, and in many instances and cases, trying to put the genie of lost virtue back in the bottle. Now, of course, there's a political agenda behind it. That's not anything that we have to that we have to address at any great detail, because there is a political agenda behind it. Now, if we want to look at why the agenda exists for the exact same reasons that I just shared with you about how people are now beginning to experience a relationship between two people, a man and a woman. Meanwhile, there is this forced acceptance of what's happening in the transgender community, the transgender movement, transgender consciousness. So there is a massive kind of um, almost Tavistockian aspect to what's taking place now. If you put the two together separately, right? You can look at this movement theoretically over here, this movement over here, and they may not have anything to do with each other on the surface, but when you put them together, they certainly do. And what we're looking at is a massive reordering or an attempt to reorder the human, personal, individual, and collective brain. Because one of the things that we do have the ability still, because we're not complete robots yet, is that we can be empathic or empathetic, and we can see ourselves in these situations, because everybody has something in their past that is scarred. It is scar tissue. It is wounding. Everybody's got something in their past. That I mean, if you, that's the reason why people get triggered, because if you don't have something in your past, well, it's probably a pretty good chance that you grew up in a spectacular environment with a mother and a father at home and had good values, and those are really healthy and strong people. It's just the way it is. It doesn't always mean that that's going to be the case. Every now and then, there is a mutant gene which comes through, but by and large, that is the foundation, the nexus of having well-rounded, solid people, individuals who make good decisions. Now, there can be some interesting things that come out of situations that are not that way. Jasper's just decided to join the morning stream here. What's going on, Jay? Give me five, man. Give me five. The lion. This guy has had a good, solid family upbringing. He makes good choices, right? He makes good choices every single day because he's had a good upbringing. Anyway, I'm not saying that just because you have a broken family, or sort of a challenging or difficult past, that you cannot be a good or solid human. And in fact, there can be some very interesting things that happen with the sort of the variables, the free radicals that come into our lives. It can create interesting people. And as a result of that, they have their own piece that they add to whatever it is that we're going through. But bringing this back to Me Too, hashtag Me Too, and the transgender movement, it's part of one larger effort to sway, control, bend, contort, and distort collective consciousness. And as a result of that, the individual mind. And then the individual mind becomes enchained. Yes, I know. I know. You do not want to be defined. He's like Kanye West, man. This cat's like Kanye West. Yes. Wants a little handshake. There you go. Yes, handshake. Um, so bringing this back to the whole consciousness piece, it is not helping us. It is not helping us. It is not bringing us closer. It is not leading towards true understanding. what it's leading to is condemnation, fear, apprehension, anxiety. It is exhuming the past, which I think can be important to some degree. But I think exhuming the past on a collective level might be a little more appropriate, like what happened on 9/11. That would be an important exhumation as far as I'm concerned. Or what happened really happened at Sandy Hook. I saw an interesting video with I think it was Nathan Lift the Veil, and he was talking about what's going on with Alex Jones and how Alex Jones is being sued. And one of the things that he's absolutely correct about is how Alex Jones is basically lying because he was all over Sandy Hook. He was all over the fact that it wasn't what it appeared to be. And he's really disingenuously said, I never said that. I never said that. I never said that. And I think his team has done everything in their power in order to go back and scrub those videos. And I think that this is a faulty defense on Alex Jones's part. But not only is it faulty, but it creates a real rift in believability and accountability that he's had with his info warriors. If I was an info warrior, which I've never been with Jones, and I saw this, I would be completely dismayed. And I'd have to really reevaluate my relationship to him and his material. And when I saw him, the first time I actually saw this in Alex Jones was when he got set up for Pizzagate. And I do believe that there are some serious breadcrumbs with Pizzagate, pun not intended. But at the same time, he wound up getting body slammed, and it was a very clear takedown because of what happened. And with the guy who was supposedly there, the lawyer, who just happened to be there on the day some son of some politician decided to go postal, but really didn't do anything at all, and was removed from the premises. That guy got on Alex Jones's show, and clearly he had ties to other people. I mean, this is the way these things work. And I saw Alex grovel like a dog, and I was like, wow, this is not good. But one of my longtime listeners, Audra from Michigan, had something really basic and fundamental, but really important to add to this whole Alex Jones thing. I'm going to come back to the hashtag #MeToo. Is the fact that he had an incredible amount to lose. If you look at the way he set up his lifestyle, he had a massive, massive divorce, very expensive, with his ex-wife Kelly, who I think now is just, like a pig in shit. Although I'm not calling her a pig, would never do that. I'm just using a metaphor. You know what I'm talking about. It's that thing that pigs actually feel nice and happy about. But she's there right now because she's witnessed the takedown of her ex-husband, who is the father of her kids. And somewhere in there, she believes that this is good for him, good for America, and good for their kids. Because apparently what will then happen is that her kids will go through some kind of reorientation to understand that their father wasn't what he was supposed to be to them, and that he's actually a very, very bad person, and that they have to come to terms with that. And when they come to terms with that, they'll disavow him. And once they disavow him, then they'll be able to enter into society again with a much clearer and balanced view of not just Alex Jones, but what he represents. And at that point, well, they'll be responsible citizens. I don't think it's that easy, and I don't think it really actually works that way. I feel like Alex Jones started off at one point in time, even though his father has all these CIA ties and CIA assets. He started off at one point in time thinking that he could use his connections, which were there very early on, by the way, to use his connections to get on KLBJ, which was a very difficult thing to do back in the day, and still is. If I wanted to get a show on KLBJ, they wouldn't have me. But if I had some very, very powerful friends and very powerful sponsors, they might give me an hour on the radio station. That's quite possible. So Alex started off, I think, more or less with this idea that even though he knew he was a made man early on, that he could get away with what he could get away with. And I think ultimately he became more and more made along the way. And when that happens, there's just too much gravity, too much to lose. And now we're seeing his fall. And it does have something to do astrologically with that South Node in Aquarius. I mean, there's other aspects too. That's not the only one. And it's funny because he's always been very deferential to transgenders. I wonder why. Didn't somebody find something on Jones's laptop like in between callers, in between segments, he was cruising a transgender like porn site or something like that? Maybe that's why he's never had anything bad to say about the transgender movement. Anyway, bringing this back to hashtag MeToo and transgender, what's taking place here is a reordering of the social norm. That's number one. And the reordering the social norm is this group is a group that you need to have empathy for, compassion for. This is a group that you have to accept, whether or not you find them acceptable. It doesn't really matter, because if you don't find them acceptable, there are going to be consequences. And this new species, it's like a new species. We have to accept the new species. And meanwhile, the previous species is being essentially broken down and redistributed, right? Because this is how these things work from the archonic perspective, from the dualistic alchemy, which is, okay, here we go. Heteronormity must collapse and devolve into an entropic state of decay, while over here on the other side, this new relationship to this new theoretical evolution of humanity must be embraced. It must be embraced. It must be supported. And if it is not embraced and it's not supported, then there are consequences. And those consequences tend to be social. The social consequences being that you can be blacklisted, you can be shadow banned, you can be shut down, whatever they are. Or you can, at a very moderate level, be shamed. Oh, how can you think that? That's bigoted. That's ignorant. That's hateful. These are the three things now. Add racist into it. These are the four methodologies of control. And the people who spout these methodologies of control are basically the agents of Big Brother. I call them little brother and little sister. And they've been programmed to go into the front lines and essentially use this technology. And they believe that they're justified because they believe that they have a sense of moral indignation, righteous indignation. And they can shake their fist and they can feel good about it and have a sense of, I guess the closest would be like a virtue signal. So this is the organizing principle. And society must exist or has to exist with some form of organizing principle. If we descend into chaos and into what I would call dark anarchy, there's a different version of anarchy, which is all about self-responsibility, self-governance, which is a very different model. And it's a radical organizing principle. But if we descend into dark anarchy, then we no longer have any organizing principle, and as a result of that, we don't exist. And the organizing principle right now is in conflict. And this is what the battle is about. It is about the organizing principle. On the one hand, we have the left-handed side, the left-handed path, and then the right-handed side and the right-handed path. You can clearly see this in that movie Wild Wild Country with Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh and Manan Sheila, we're talking about two very different organizing principles. And they're fighting. They're fighting it out to see which one is going to essentially prevail. And at that time, Antelope and Wasco County prevailed. It's interesting. I think if they tried to do Rajneesh Param all over again today in this environment, I think they'd have a very, very different outcome, to be honest with you. But I don't think you would have the same level of zeal that you did with uh, Rajneesh Param. You know, that's really, if you go back to 1982. So let's say most of the boomers were born in 1950, let's say 1949, 1948, let's say 1948, 49, 50. These are the big boom years. The war is over, people are getting busy, right? So if you go to 1982, 1983, those people would be, let's see, 48 to 68 is 20, and then to 78 is 30, right? So they're around like 35, right around that, right? 35, 34. So if we look at that sample size, they were at pretty much at the height of their earning power. I think statistically, you're at the height of your earning power in your late 30s, early 40s. So they're right there. They're on the porch of it. And a lot of the boomers had generational money. And so you get to this place where you're kind of near the peak of your earning power. Physically, 35, 36, 34, right around there, a lot of energy still. You still have a lot of energy to put into something. And then you're in a collective experience where you are basically mirrored by a number of other people who come from the same background, share very similar traits, all the things that need to take place with sort of this coalescence of energy. And so they had that. And they had that Pluto and Leo sense of zeal and energy and enthusiasm for this collective effort that they were involved in. You also have to understand that the boomers have Uranus in Cancer. And Uranus in Cancer is about radical representation of home and community. So this was right in their wheelhouse. Right. I mean, if you look at what happened during that moment in time with Rajneesh Param, the three outer planets, just in that community alone, were having their moment in time. Neptune and Libra, fluidity between relationship. Right? That was a big part. It's like sort of this poly wave that was sweeping through Rajneesh Param and continued to sweep through from that moment going forward, crashing upon the shores of Marin County, where today it's become an ocean of devotion, if you know what I mean. So that was a really interesting experience, but I'm sure the reason why, like, it's a perfect combination of an organizing principle that has coalesced. And so what we have here now is we have this battle for an organizing principle. Will the organizing principle be won by the left? Is their argument and their velocity and the forces of propaganda and media strong enough to create enough of a momentum to turn enough heads to say, well, this is where we're headed? And these are the aspects that we need to embrace in order for this new organizing principle to take root. Or is it going to be on the right, which basically says, look, these are actually false or synthetic social premises, and they're based on very limiting circumstances and conditions that have nothing to do with freedom and truth. And when we begin to exert our efforts to bring freedom and truth to the forefront, because this is what we believe in, this is our organizing principle, this is where the clash of ideologies come in. And this is where the control of the message. This is the front lines of where this is all taking place. So this is where we are. This is where we are. And out of this, whatever happens, because we cannot stay in chaos forever, as much as some people are think that we will, and I don't believe we will. It has to have some resolution because that's the nature of things. People will get too tired and they'll throw in the towel if they have, and you could already kind of see it on an individual level. People are saying, "I'm done. I can't take this." Every single day, there's this more bullshit, more bullshit, and more bullshit, and more bullshit. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. Retreat is actually a very positive response. Because if one throws themselves into the fray every single day, you have to question their sanity. Why? There are some things we can affect. There are other things we can't affect. We cannot. Can we affect what the Rothschild banking system is going to do to the Federal Reserve every day, or how the cost or the price of gold is controlled? No, we can't affect that, at least not at that level. But what we can affect is how we're going to respond to things and how we're going to reconstruct our internal network so that we can then branch off and have strong connections with other people with their internal networks. This is what we can affect. And this is, for us, this is the front lines of change and evolution. This is where we mutate and jump to the new species. And the new species will be the species that can live on this planet in a way that would be much more in tune with organic rhythms, nature, not wholly rejecting technology, because technology is here to stay, and there's some good things about technology. This is where I believe we're evolving. And when we get there, who knows how long it'll be, but that's where we're going. But between now and then, we are in the throes of a conflict. And the conflict is to determine which organizing principle is going to win. And I think we need to be very clear about this is what it is. It looks like it's a political battle between left and right. This is what it looks like. And there are players and there are actors and there are criminals and there are thieves and there are so-called heroes. And I guarantee you 2 years from now, we won't remember half of them. It's true. There is an impermanence to the phase that we're in. But at the same time, it's also very important to understand what's taking place. What's taking place is the battleground for the organizing principle moving forward. Deputy A.G. Rosenstein heading to White House, expecting to be fired. Sources say, well, it's about time. This will be an interesting ripple effect, won't it? Be very, very interesting. I'm not going to speak too much about Rosenstein, but I can tell you, just like pretty much everybody else in Washington, D.C., he's a traitor. He's a traitor. He's a traitor for a number of reasons, but I think he's a traitor at a core level to the ethics and the morality of being a human, first and foremost. Everything else is window dressing. It's stats and figures. But he's definitely, and Washington is filled with them, by the way. Anything else here? The White House considers draft order to look into Google and Facebook. It would be very easy for Google and Facebook to be thwarted. I talked about this earlier. All you have to do is look at their taxes, their antitrust exemptions, anything that could force them to pay more money. And they would listen quite seriously to what you'd have to say. However, because Google and Facebook, all the big tech giants, have the tentacles, the NSA, the CIA kind of in there and hooked, right? There's probably a good chance the government's not going to move on them. Now, this is something that's interesting. This is one of the reasons why I left California. and why many people are leaving California. In one of his last acts of pure and utter treachery, Governor Jerry Brown signs measure allowing utilities to bill customers to pay for wildfire legal costs. So this is PG&E. PG&E has been shown by Deborah Tavares to be owned by the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds own, I think, quite a number of public utilities throughout this country, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just read this to you. It's just a brief paragraph. Governor Jerry Brown signs measure allowing utilities to bill customers to pay for wildfire legal costs. He's been one of the most dangerous public figures for the last 30 years. And apparently he's leaving. November, he's out. The ex mayor of San Francisco, the golden boy, Gavin Newsom, looks like he'll be governor, but he'll just be another iteration of Jerry Brown. So Jerry Brown has signed a measure allowing utilities to bill their customers to pay for future legal settlements stemming from devastating 2017 wildfires. Brown announced Friday he'd signed the bill, which is aimed at preventing bankruptcy for PG&E. The massive utility faces billions of dollars in liability if investigators determine its equipment caused the Tubbs fire that destroyed thousands of homes and killed 27 people in Santa Rosa last year. So essentially, what Jerry Brown is doing is he's going to allow PG&E to raise the rates of its users to cover its legal costs. And he's doing it because of the threat to the public interest of the public utility. It wouldn't become bankrupt. Maybe it should become bankrupt. Maybe somebody else could come in and run it. Wouldn't that be interesting? I mean, the infrastructure is there. They have all of the transformers. They have everything. They have the grid. They even have the employees, right? The employees could be moved over to a new company that comes in and takes over for PG&E. Why would bankruptcy be such a big deal? Bankruptcy or the process of bankruptcy or a company being bankrupt is in some ways a condition of the marketplace. If the company cannot stand or deal with the fact that they're becoming bankrupt due to the fact that they don't have the assets to take care of things like a messy lawsuit against their shitty equipment, which was the cause of a fire, then maybe they don't deserve to be in business. Isn't this how the free market economy works? No, it really doesn't work that way because there's really no such thing as a true free market economy. However, in typical fashion, they will pass the cost on to the same people who have suffered and are suing them so that they can save their ass, continue to literally be in power. I wanted to read something a little bit different here before we sign off today. And it's a fairly brief piece. And it has to do with relationships since we're in the season of Libra and we're dealing with relationships. By the way, how was everybody's equinox last night? Wow. Did you see that moon? See that big red Aries moon? The big red electric Aries moon? I had an experience last night. I don't want to get into it. Maybe I do. Maybe I do. It was very, very, very intense. Very intense. It was one of those moments in time where you have to figure out, like, really what to do. And it had to do with one of my neighbors. And single mom, 9-year-old girl, sweet girl. I know him a little bit. And the mom is usually in a fairly constant state of distress and being unhappy. And the reason I know this is because I can see it. She goes out on her little patio and talks in a very animated fashion, and is usually in a state of intoxication. So last night I step outside and there's this thing going on in the parking lot where my car is, and the young girl is having a real heart-to-heart conversation about why she's not happy with her mother, with these two women who live downstairs. Nice gals. And the next thing I know is I'm in the middle of this crisis with this girl who's really unhappy and breathing hard and having anxiety, and didn't want to go back to her mom's place. Just didn't want to go back. So what do you do in a situation like that? And it was not resolving. I mean, this little girl was digging her heels in, and the mom wasn't in the best emotional, physical, mental condition. It was a very interesting experience. You know, 'cause you have to think about the safety of the girl. Mhm. You have to think about it. But on the other hand, you have to think about what happens if you decide, well, we're just going to call the cops, and that sets a whole other domino effect in motion. The girl could be removed from her house. She could go into a foster home, and it could be even worse. So we managed to figure this thing out. It was not easy, though. Let me tell you. I'm not going to get into the sordid details around it, but she eventually wound up going back and sleeping at her mom's place. Um, anyway, not easy, not easy. But I found myself in the middle of this thing, playing out this very Libran kind of role as a curbside mediator. Anyway, so how did they get it? How did they get to that situation? Well, most situations in life are caused by people making bad choices, and in this case, a bad relationship choice. Just going to read this. This is from Psychology Today. 4 reasons we bind ourselves to bad relationships. These psychological factors can keep you from making positive change. This is from Andrea Bonior, Bonior. I apologize, Andrea, in advance if I butchered your name, but here it goes. In my years as a psychologist and advice columnist, I've seen an inordinate amount of people suffering in toxic or even abusive relationships. Often, as an outsider, we can become incredulous as to why someone would stay in a situation that's so clearly bad for them, and yet it happens every day, even when the person recognizes that their relationship has its flaws. Why is it that it can be so hard to leave? What makes breaking up with a toxic partner so difficult? Why do people who are perfectly rational and functional in other aspects of their life all too often have a blind spot when it comes to seeking out relationships that are healthy and where they're treated the way they deserve to be treated? Though this can be maddening to watch as a bystander, the answers are actually very simple. Of course, every relationship is different, and even of every bad one. And yet, there are some basic psychological principles that often apply when someone lacks the motivation to see the relationship for what it really is, or to get up the courage to leave. Here are some of the reasons that your friend or loved one, and this is me, maybe even you, may be blinded to how bad their relationship is, or even if they're not, then why they may be reluctant to get out, much to your frustration. Number one, the principle of sunk cost. It's an economic principle that applies all too well to relationship decision making. Sunk cost. Our perception of what we have already invested that we can't get back often makes us less likely to chart a new path for fear of losing our original investment. We see this in everyday decision making, like how you may not want to hang up after being put on hold a certain amount of time. Even if you really need to be free to go do other things at that moment, you've already put in enough time waiting, so you want to see it through, despite the fact that you're now needed by your family You'll probably get a shorter wait time if you tried again during daytime the next day. Or perhaps you might decide to keep spending exorbitant amounts of money on repairs on one of your old appliances instead of considering purchasing a new one, since keeping the old appliance seems to justify the money you've already poured into it. People do that with cars, by the way. The same is true in relationships. I've worked with many people who have stuck with the bad relationship for a long time, with each passing month becoming more of an investment that they are scared of losing by leaving. They picture having to start over in the dating scene, fearing that that would mean all the years they spent getting serious with their partners were for naught. In reality, though, different calculation needs to be made. Visualize this. The investment is done, it can never be recouped, whether you stay or go. But what can be recouped is any future investment by choosing not to make it. Plus, your past investment in the relationship was not for nothing. It was not a waste. If you can use your experience to gain insight into yourself, your patterns, and how to be more vigilant against making the same mistake, not to mention flexing your independence muscles by asserting yourself and leaving a bad relationship, then you have the power to make your investment actually pay off. Number two is cognitive dissonance. In short, cognitive dissonance occurs when we have two competing thoughts or actions that are not naturally compatible. I would say that that's very much connected to the inconjunct in astrology, by the way. We do not like the fact that they don't go together well. So we try to change that what we can in order to have less friction. It's why we feel more positive about a candidate we voted for right after we voted for them rather than right before. Once our vote is done and we can't change it, it causes dissonance to believe they weren't the right choice. So we convince ourselves even more strongly that they were. Let's say you have been with a partner for 3 years who doesn't treat you very well, and you know this on some level, and your friends and family have said as much. But there's also a voice inside you that says that if this person didn't treat you well, then it would be completely unacceptable to spend 3 years of your life with them. It's kind of a sunk cost mentality as well. If they are that bad, you reason, then you should have left long ago. As being in a toxic relationship for a long period of time goes against everything you were taught and everything you believe in, right? So what can you change? You can't change the fact you spent 3 years with them. Hey, it's sunk cost all over again. See, I just said that. But you can change whether you believe they are truly that bad for you. And so you try desperately to convince yourself that they're not. And you stay. And all the while, your friends and family cringe in disappointment and bewilderment. The myth of arrival. Many people spend their days in bad relationships thinking it must be on the verge of getting better. They feel that any given day is just temporary. Things will improve when their partner is less busy at work, isn't so stressed about their family, finally gets their degree, has a little more breathing room with money, and yet days go by this way, which all too quickly turn into weeks, months, and years. Any given day you can write off. What happens when you reach your 500th day, your 1000th day? The myth of arrival falsely tells us that once you reach some fixed point, you will have arrived at a destination that will magically be better just by the passage of time alone. Everything will fall into place. This can all too easily keep us in a bad relationship because instead of taking control and realizing that the here and now is unacceptable, we convince ourselves it's just a blip in the screen. We tell ourselves it's just the path to a much greater destination. Well, what if instead we realize that today, the moments we are living right now, is the actual destination? If your life ended tomorrow, will your relationship have been worth it? Was it giving you what you needed as is? Or were you pinning your hopes on something that you can't control, imagining that things will get better when circumstances change, and yet your partner has no specific plan to change themselves? Don't judge a relationship on a future hypothetical. Ask yourself if it's truly what you need and deserve as is in your life, in this moment, because that's how you're living it, isn't it? And the last one is learned helplessness. Let me just read this. Humans can have notoriously low accuracy when assessing their level of control over their environments. One particular way this can wreak havoc is through learned helplessness, which happens when someone significantly underestimates the amount of control they have in a situation, usually because they've gotten too used to having little control in a real situation in the past. Let's say you have a boss who criticizes you no matter what you do, whether you put in extremely hard work on something or do virtually nothing at all. Over time, you will learn that your level of effort doesn't really matter. You are helpless in getting your boss's praise. You give up. That's probably pretty understandable. But let's say you get a new boss entirely and your old mindset continues, yet you still believe that your efforts don't matter And so you continue not to try. In this case, you now have learned helplessness and are falsely underestimating your control of the situation. After all, your new boss may very well be more reasonable with their feedback. If you put in the effort now, it may very well pay off. This dynamic becomes quite common for people in bad relationships, since the perception of autonomy has likely been further damaged by a domineering, insensitive, or controlling partner. They're used to not being able to change their partner's treatment of them. So that bleeds into their beliefs about their ability to exert any control over their lives whatsoever. In these cases, they may feel far more helpless than they actually are. They may think that they're not capable of finding a person who will treat them well, perhaps because they don't really deserve it. They feel they don't really deserve it. Or they may feel that their life will for sure still be happy whether they are with their partner or not. So they might as well stay. So it's like, okay, things are shit, so I may as well just stay anyway. A person with learned helplessness may also believe that they don't have the power within themselves to leave. Even if physical safety is not an issue, they may think that they're not capable of being in a functional relationship, that it must be them who is the problem, that nothing they do will be able to make them have a happy partnership. In these cases, it's crucial to keep communication open with friends and family, something that controlling partners are on guard against. It is often the loved ones who can remind us of our worth and the life outside of the relationship. In addition to providing the logistical and emotional support that it may take to leave in time by taking steps to break free of the toxic relationship, they can reverse the learned helplessness in the ultimate way by taking care of themselves in the way they deserve. So, since we're in the season of Libra, I decided to share that with you. Many people find themselves trapped in relationships that are not really all that healthy, compelling, or good for them. So, if you see yourself in any of those categories, you may want to look at it and begin to address it. That last one, learned helplessness, that is a trait of cults and cult leaders, by the way. Let me get into the chat room here. Let's see what we got going. No offense to snakes. Another snake already burned out. Thanks for watching one episode. Good morning, sunshines. Tell. Whoa. So maybe we can all send some unconditional love to the situation, Robert. Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to, say anything more about what happened last night, but it was a very heavy and sort of intense situation. And, we'll see how it unfolds. That's where we're at. Anything else in the old chat room? Chatteroo, what do we got? Amazing that growing up having nuns thwapping me with the rule turns out to be relatively tame, insane upbringing. Yeah. Made you a good person, Steve. Gave you some discipline. You can't write books without discipline. He's going to say Bill Hicks said it. That's from Emily. Shows his true colors. Dr. J. Then Jasper, you're getting emojis, man. He's all blissed out over here. All right, why don't we get on out of here? It's the top of the hour. You people have things to do. You have lives to attend to, relationships that you can foster and grow in, especially if they're healthy ones. So I'm out of here. Use your head to discern what's real. Your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and I'll be back tomorrow with another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. Have a great day.